Okay, Bailey's always great and gives us that cue to go ahead and get started. Welcome to today's session. If you've not taken a minute, please put your name and contact information into the chat. As you can see, we are recording today's session. Our session recording will be on our Canvas page that you can go back and review. So if you're on this call, you're giving us permission to have it be recorded with you. If you've never joined an ECHO session, welcome to one of our ECHO sessions. We are really hoping that ECHO is an interactive community. So if you have any questions or comments or anything that you want to share, please put it in the chat. You can raise your hand and we can call on you. Bailey and Kurt, our two hub members, they will help monitor that chat and answer any questions. We also do a case presentation or a case narrative, and that is the best way to really get and gain information from the colleagues that are on this call. So if you have a case that you're struggling with or you just want more information on, please try doing a case presentation. Send it out to us at earlyecho.usu.edu and we'll get you set up on a date. Anytime we're talking about families or anybody on this call, please remember to protect individual privacy. So avoid using any first, middle, or last names. De-identify any of the situations. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to one of our amazing hub members. They all have an asterisk in front of their name so that you can notice and reach out to them. The key components of an ECHO session are a didactic speaker. Then we will do a case presentation where we will then break up into small breakout groups and do some recommendations. It is really building that professional networking and sharing of knowledge. We've all been on Zoom for quite a long time. It seems like forever now. So take a minute and rename your profile so we can all see who's here, know who to reach out to if we have further questions about something that you've shared. And also, if, like I said, you can always raise your hand or just put information into the chat. You can always pre-register for our ECHO sessions. You can also register for our ECHO newsletter. So you could do that by reaching out or emailing earlyecho@aggies.usu.edu. We do a certificate or a credit of attendance. This survey link is wrong, but we will start dropping the survey link for today's session in chat. If you'll take a minute to fill that out, those really help us keep these sessions free and give us valuable information to take back to our group to keep these going. Canvas is the platform that we use to store information, so you can find past sessions, past recommendations, any cases, all of that stuff can be found on our Canvas page. If you don't have access to that, please again email earlyecho@usu.edu. Case studies are a great way. I know it's always scary to do a case study, but they're a great way to get information from everybody on this call that has just great information and valuable resources. So I am going to stop talking and introduce our speaker today. Her name is Rachel Gilbert. She is a sleep consultant and is also a fellow early intervention provider. So Rachel, you can go ahead and get started.
Okay, thank you. I'm excited to be here. Let me get my presentation up. Okay, and then see if we can get it into the full screen. Okay. Will you just give me a thumbs up if you can see that and also hear me? Okay, wonderful. So, like was mentioned, my name is Rachel Gilbert. I'm currently working as a sleep consultant, but my background is special education and early intervention. Tell you a little bit about myself. So I got my bachelor's degree at USU in special ed, and I did the double emphasis in severe disabilities, and then the birth to 5 early intervention. And then after I graduated, I taught for 3 years. I taught grades 3 through 7. And during that time, I got married and had my first baby. And I taught for about a year and a half once I had my first daughter. And it was a lot. And so I was looking for something that I could maybe do while she was young at home. And then go back to teaching when she's a little bit older. And so that's how I kind of got into sleep consulting. It was also because of my daughter that I became interested in sleep consulting, because she did not sleep for the first 5 months of her life. And so I did a lot of research and trying to figure it out, and kind of stumbled across sleep consulting, which I'd never heard of before. And it was life-changing for our family. And so I knew that that was something that I was interested in and would like to continue to help families who have kids who struggle with sleep. And so that's how I got into that. I trained through the Sleep Sense program, and then I've just been working from home and working with families. I had another daughter in December. So my oldest daughter is Olivia, she's 3, and my youngest, her name's Charlotte, and we call her Charlie, and she's 7 months old. And so that's kind of a little bit about me. I'm a mom and sleep consultant and special ed teacher. So yeah, that's my background. So when I got asked to do this presentation, I was thinking a lot about what I wanted to share, what would be helpful. And obviously we all know how important sleep is, because whenever we don't sleep ourselves, it's very rough. And then when our kids aren't sleeping, it's even more rough. And so I just wanted to talk a little bit about sleep, why it's important, and then also ways that you can help the families that you're working with. We're going to just go over kind of the foundations of what helps us sleep, and specifically ways that we can use those to help kids, young babies, toddlers, etc. sleep. So I don't think I need to spend too much time on the benefits of sleep. I think we all know, but just as an overview, sleep really is one of the most important things that we can do for our health. It, like this quote says, services all aspects: molecular, energy, hormonal, intellectual, alertness, mood, everything, for us and for our children. I broke it down a little bit more. Sleep for parents, especially with new babies. For moms, there's less incidence of anxiety and depression and postpartum mood disorders, decreased stress, increased energy, balanced hormones. For our kiddos, it gives them, it helps their brain development. It's when their brains are working, and it's when they grow and gain weight, and it helps their immune system. Really, it just affects so many areas of our health and well-being. So when we're not sleeping and when our kids aren't sleeping, it is really difficult. So what can we do? So these are, there's, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 kind of foundations that we can look at of ways to help our kids sleep better. Now, these are all things, they work adults, they work for kids, for babies, but obviously we'll focus a little bit more on babies and toddlers and how we can help them with these. So When I'm working with a family, what I'll usually do before we get into anything else is we'll look at these foundations and kind of do an evaluation of how they're doing in each of these things and seeing if there's something in here that we can fix or resolve or tweak to help improve their sleep. And then once we've gone through those, and if there's still issues, then we have kind of a better idea of what we need to work on. So what we'll do today is I'm just going to go a little bit more in depth about each of them. And if you guys have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I think we'll do some questions at the end as well. But I'm just going to go through them. And then I also have a handout that you will be able to get at the end as well that has these listed on them. And that you can then give to parents as well. And then I put this at the bottom, this little note to myself that says the 4-hour sleep rule for parents, because I didn't want to forget to mention this. Because one thing that I always want to talk about with parents before we get started, even with their kids, is if they are not getting at least a 4-hour stretch of sleep themselves, then we want to look at what we can do to help them get that stretch of sleep. If baby's waking up every 2 hours, is there a way that their partner can wake up for one of the feeds? Is there a way that they could take a long nap in the afternoon and have someone else watch the baby? Just we want to troubleshoot that, because if as adults we are not getting at least 1 4-hour stretch of sleep in the day, and this is the very, very minimum, of course, it's equal to like buzzed driving or drunk driving is how it affects our abilities to function. And I'll often hear moms say, well, it's my husband that he needs to go to work, so he needs to function, so he needs a full night's sleep. And I like to push back on that a little bit and say, if you are at home with your kids, you are also working and needing to be able to function to help your children. You don't want to be driving your toddlers to preschool and not be able to think or function and basically at the same level. What I'm trying to say is, like, as if you were drinking and driving, that is the same effect of not having enough sleep. And so I always like to make sure that parents have a plan in place so that both parents, both caregivers are getting that at least 4-hour stretch of sleep. And then we can start working on these foundations for their kids so that hopefully everyone is getting longer stretches of sleep. So the first one is, there we go, is a daily routine. And I think we all know the benefits of routines, both in a school setting and at home. They really kind of set the tone for our day. You know that kiddos thrive on routines. It gives them a sense of safety, well-being. Sorry, I'm pulling up my notes as well so I don't forget anything. And so when we set up our days in a consistent and predictable way, it helps our kiddos with their sleep. One thing I always like to have parents do is have a consistent wake up and bedtime. Now, when I say consistent, it doesn't mean 7:30 on the dot every morning, because babies are humans, they're not robots, but I like it to be within like a half-hour window. So 7 to 7:30, we start our morning. And then bedtime as well, 7:30 during that window is when we'll go to bed. Not only does that create that routine, but it also helps our circadian rhythms, their circadian rhythms, and our bodies to kind of get into that flow so that their bodies will start to naturally get tired and get ready for sleep at that time of the day. And then we'll also do, if they're taking naps, having those at a consistent time, and then doing a bedtime routine. And we'll talk about bedtime routines a little bit more, I think, on the next slide. Something else that is also really important is an early bedtime. Young kids thrive with early bedtimes. And if we push our kids too much to stay up too late, we start seeing spikes in cortisol that kind of gives them that second wind, and then it makes it even harder for them to fall asleep. And so sleep experts all agree that between about 7 and 8 p.m. is kind of that sweet spot for kids up until 8, 9, 10 years old. And especially the younger they are, the more important that early bedtime is. And then the other thing we look at when looking at our daily routine is how old the child is, how many naps they need, how many hours of sleep they need, based on their age. So I have this chart that I use. We call it our sleep cheat sheet, that we look at the age of our child, and then it kind of tells us how many naps they need, about how long we want those naps to be, which obviously is a range. Like I said, kids are not robots. So we like just knowing kind of the range that we want it to be in. And then we look at wake windows, which is how long they can be awake before needing to sleep again, which when they're younger, it's a very short period of time, 45 minutes to an hour for a newborn, and slowly increases as they get older. And then again, that bedtime, early bedtime, about how many hours of nighttime sleep we are wanting them to get, and then how many hours of sleep we want them to get during the day. This chart I also included on the handout so that when you have parents ask questions like, how many naps is my child supposed to be getting? What is a normal amount of sleep? What should we be looking at? You can refer to this chart. And I'll just do a quick example for my daughter, who is 7 months old. She was actually born 5 weeks early. And so I use her adjusted age for her sleep. And I found that has been pretty consistent. She's about a month behind. So right now I kind of go off of a 6-month schedule for her. And she is right in that transition between needing 3 naps a day and 2 naps a day. And then she can handle being awake during the day for about 2 hours and 15 minutes. So I will look at what time she wakes up. It's usually about 7:30. So if she were to wake up at 7, then I would plan her first nap for 9:15 a.m. And then she usually wakes up around noon. And so then I would plan her next nap. Trying to do math in my head. Let's see. For about 2:30, 3 o'clock p.m. And then I will base her bedtime off of the time that she woke up. And it usually ends up being in that window. If she has shorter naps, that's kind of when we do the 3 naps a day. We'll get like a cat nap in to help us get to bedtime. But we try and keep her in that 2.5 hour window of being awake between all of her naps and bedtime. And we find that she really does fall asleep much easier, is less fussy, happier during the day because she's not becoming overtired. And then wake windows are also important because we want to look at if they're undertired, then they're going to have a harder time falling asleep, obviously, and we don't want to push them to be overtired because then they have a hard time falling asleep as well. And so these wake windows, it's not an exact science, but we have found that most kids fall into this range. And so it takes some trial and error working with parents to find kind of their child's sweet spot. And then it seems like as soon as we find it a month later, it changes. And so anyways, but it is nice to have kind of that guide to know about how long the child should be awake. Okay, sorry, I'm just making sure there aren't any questions. All right. Okay. Next one is the bedtime routine. I love talking about bedtime routines because research has found that a calming bedtime routine is one of the best things that you can do to help your child go to sleep at night. It becomes a cue or a signal to the brain that, hey, it is time for bed, and it helps them to calm down faster and easier. Sorry, I have some things on my screen, so it's hard to see. There we go. I also like talking about bedtime routines because they are such an important time of the day for connection between the parent and child, which I also think is important for helping them sleep at night. If they're not getting that connection time during the day, then they're going to be waking up more at night looking for that. And so using their bedtime routine as a time to connect, spend time together is also really important. So kind of the parameters we look at for a bedtime routine, we want it to last between 15 to 30 minutes, not longer than 30 minutes, but also not too much shorter than 15. And it can be super simple, but just doing the same thing in the same order every night so that their bodies get used to that, and that becomes that cue, like, oh, I'm putting my pajamas on, next I'm going to read a book, then I'm going to get in bed and sing a song, and then it'll be time for sleeping. Helps them fall asleep so much easier. So a couple examples. I did an example for a baby that can look like nursing, and you change their diaper, put their pajamas on and their sleep sack, sing them a song, and then put them in the crib. For toddlers, it might look a little bit different. You might do pajamas first and then brush their teeth, read a book, hugs and kisses, and tuck into bed. It can be anything. I usually work with families, see what is important for them, what they like to do. Usually most families have something in place already. I just like to reiterate the importance of it being the same thing in the same order every night. So when creating a bedtime routine, I have them do something that is sustainable. So if they're reading 5 books at night, and they're like, I can't do that every night, take it out of the routine and just switch it to one. And it doesn't have to be the same book, but having that reading time, whatever book it is important to keep in the routine.
Rachel.
Yeah.
This is Kurt. There's just a question in the chat.
Oh, thank you.
That says, how do you convince parents who keep their kids up until midnight that the kids need to go to bed earlier?
Great question. I usually will show them the research, which I don't have on me right now, sorry, but I like to, show them some of the research from there's on the sleep. Sorry, my mind is blanking right now. Anyway, show them the research that says that kids do better with an early bedtime. I usually ask them to try it for a week or two. I remind them that if kids are in bed early, it means you have some alone time during the day where you can also relax for yourself, which is important. And then I also like to kind of talk through their kids' behavior. Maybe I often see when kids stay up late, they kind of get that wired but tired behaviors where they're just kind of running around off the walls, having a hard time calming down. It's usually because they've been pushed into that overtired state. And so when we get them to fall asleep before that happens, then they kind of avoid that altogether. So I always ask them, let's try it. Let's try it for 2 weeks and see how it goes. If you're not convinced, then you can keep doing it how you're doing it. But I always ask them to try and just see how it goes. Next thing I like to look at is the environment that they're sleeping in. These things that I have listed, especially a dark, cool room, are proven effective. There have been scientific studies done for us as adults And for kids that sleeping in a cool environment is necessary, our bodies need to drop, I believe it's 2 degrees in order to fall asleep. So that cool environment helps our bodies go to sleep and then stay asleep. And then dark is also really important because light triggers or stops melatonin production. Darkness triggers melatonin production, which we also need in order to fall asleep. And so having it be completely dark, I have found really helps kiddos be able to fall asleep, and then stay asleep, especially once they start getting like older babies, young toddlers. If they see things around the room that they want to play with, they get distracted, they want to get up. So if it's dark, then they can't see those things, then it also helps them to stay asleep. A question I get about that often is, won't they be afraid of the dark? And we don't see, kids aren't able to be afraid of the dark until they're about 2 years old. And so under 2, it's not scary for them. It is helping them be able to get more sleep. And then if they do start showing signs of being scared of the dark when they're older, there's other things that we can look at. I put a wake to sleep clock, which we have for my toddler, that has just a very low red light, so that it's not completely dark, but it's still, the red light helps to promote sleep instead of blue light, which can wake our brains up and inhibit melatonin production. So that is an option if they mention that their child is afraid of the dark and they are older. I like having sound machines in the room. It just kind of creates a soothing environment, and also blocks out noise. It's especially helpful during nap time when there's other things going on around the house. It's kind of a barrier between those sounds, and also in the early morning. I found often that 5-6 a.m. things start happening outside. The garbage truck goes by, light starts peeking in the window, and we see lots of those early morning wakings. And so having sound kind of blocks some of those sounds, waking up, dad getting up to go to work, mom getting up to go to work, whatever it is, kind of helps them get their full 11-12 hours of sleep before they're woken up prematurely. I also like encouraging parents to use a sleep sack of some kind, because it is a way for them to stay warm, as it's like a wearable blanket, so that it encourages not having loose blankets, loose pillows, loose pajamas in the crib, which can become a safety hazard.
So Rachel, there's
Yeah.
there's a couple questions. One asked
Okay.
what you thought about red lights. I think you've answered that one. The other question in here says, I heard recently that brown noise is better than white noise. I've researched this, but yet to understand the difference. Have not researched this.
There,
Difference between white noise and brown noise, I guess.
yeah. There's conflicting research on which one's better. So white noise is more kind of just like a constant sound, like a hair dryer, kind of that. It's kind of almost an annoying sound, but it's just kind of this constant like drone is kind of what white noise is. Brown noise or green noise is more kind of like the nature sounds, like rain. I'm not 100% on brown noise. I've also heard it called, I'm not sure if it's the same as pink noise, which I've heard is kind of like the nature sounds as well. So it just kind of is the different tones, different sounds. A lot of sound machines will have different options. So for one child, the white noise might work better. the brown noise setting, or like the rain or nature sound setting might work better. So it's something that they can play around with and see kind of what works best for their child. Hopefully that answers your question. I also always like to go over with parents safe sleep, kind of back to what I was saying with the sleep sack. We like to see them sleeping on a flat, firm surface, so that they're not getting in weird positions that can block their airways, that there aren't any possibilities of them kind of falling into a crack, getting entangled. We always place them on their back, and don't want any other pillows or bedding in their bed until they are over 1. I usually say 1 for adding a blanket, and then a pillow around 2, or when they switch to a toddler bed is a good time to introduce a pillow. But before then, no other bedding other than that sleep sack that they can wear, just to ensure that nothing gets over their face during the night, and that they stay safe. A question about that I also often get when placing on their back, once they start rolling over, is that safe? Yes, once they are able to roll over onto their stomachs by themselves, and get themselves back over, it's okay to let them sleep on their stomachs. Actually, both of my girls have slept better once they could roll over. They're tummy sleepers, and my 7-month-old just started doing that. She just figured it out. And so she'll roll on to her stomach and pass out. So once they're able to do that, then it is safe, considered safe for them. And then ABCs of safe sleep is just alone, so in their own sleep surface or sleep space on their back, and in a crib, so in their own space. Okay, after all of that, we like to look at their day, what's happening in their day. If they're having trouble sleeping at night, could it be that they're not getting enough physical activity or mental stimulation during the day? For babies, that looks like getting them out of their containers, their car seats, their bouncers, their swings, and letting them have time on the floor to roll around, crawl, work on their developmental skill that they're working on. We'll see often if babies aren't getting that time during the day, and even if they are, sometimes they do this in their crib, but we'll see babies trying to practice those skills once they're placed in their cribs by themselves. And so giving them plenty of time during the day is really important, so that they get that time, and it also tires them out so that they are able to sleep. Yeah, and then the older they get, giving them plenty of time to run around and play is also really important. I also included, I mentioned it a little bit before, but times of connection and bonding during the day. I mentioned that, and I'll mention this as a little aside. You might have families who, there's kind of the debate between co-sleeping, having babies sleep on their own, what's best for their attachment to mom and dad. And I'll say that making sure you do things with them and have time to connect and bond during the day is just as important for their attachment, and having a secure attachment. And so if that's something that they're worried about, if their kids are sleeping in a different room from them, just making sure you're getting that during the day is also really important. I wanted to do a separate slide for sunlight, because this is really, really important for our sleep. And I think it is one of the reasons why so many adults, teenagers, children, everyone struggles with sleep, is we're not getting enough sun during the day. So exposure to sunlight stimulates melatonin production. And then once our eyes stop taking in that light at night, our brain releases those stores, and it's what helps us fall asleep. So if we're not getting enough light in during the day, we're not building up those melatonin stores. and it makes it a lot more difficult to fall asleep and then stay asleep. So I always like to encourage parents to get up in the morning. Morning sunlight is also really good for setting our circadian rhythm. If it's hard to get outside, if it's winter time, opening the windows, letting the sunlight in can also really help to just kind of set our circadian rhythms to that morning. And then when the sun goes down, it's time to sleep. We're exposed to so much artificial light during the day. And then at night, if we are on our screens, that it can make it really difficult and messes up our circadian rhythms. And the same is true for our kiddos. And so I like also to encourage parents to turn off screens, especially screens that are close up to their faces, if they're on an iPad or a phone or whatever, 2 hours before bedtime. If I have parents asking, like, should I supplement with melatonin? I always encourage first, I don't like recommending melatonin unless it's something that their doctor has recommended, then obviously we want them to listen to their doctor. But sunlight is how you can get natural melatonin. And so making sure those kids get out into the sun is very important. And then not having those screens before bedtime can also help. And then another thing that we look at is if they're getting enough food during the day. I have it listed out here. I won't go over each one individually. I'm not sure how long I've been talking. I should have been watching that. But you could screenshot this, or you probably already know as well how much food kids should be getting, making sure babies are getting enough if they're nursing, enough nursing sessions during the day, if they're taking bottles, that they're getting enough bottles. And then for older kids, that they're getting like a fat and a protein and a carb at each meal. If they're not getting enough during the day, then they are naturally going to be waking up more for it at night. So making sure that they're getting those full quality feeds is really important as well. And then kind of the last thing we look at is working on independent sleep skills. Younger babies, newborns don't really have those yet. It's something that we can kind of help them develop. But once they're able to fall asleep on their own, kind of put themselves to sleep on their own, we start seeing naturally longer stretches of sleep. What happens is all of us, we have our sleep cycle, and at the end of a sleep cycle, our bodies are kind of in a natural lighter state of sleep. It's where we wake up. Many times we wake up during the night and don't even realize it because we just put ourselves back to sleep. But if a baby is reliant on nursing to sleep every time, whenever they come to that end of a sleep cycle, then they start looking for that nursing to help them get back to sleep, which is when we start seeing those kids who are waking up 7, 8, 9 times a night because they just need that help to get back to sleep. And so working on kind of weaning them off of always needing to eat to fall asleep and helping them develop other ways of falling asleep, which can be done really gently. And it does not mean you have to leave your baby to cry, which is a common misconception that I hear, will also help them to get those longer stretches of sleep. And so those are the basic foundations that I look at with parents. Once we've gone through all of that, then I have kind of a better idea of what we need to work on. So just a little bit about what I do is if parents come to me saying they're struggling with sleep, we go over all of this. And then I kind of help them put a plan into place and then work with them as they implement that plan so that their child is sleeping better and then they as a family are sleeping better as well. So I wanted to give you guys this handout that has kind of an overview of all this information that we went over, and then also my email, my website. I also put my Instagram on there, which I don't use very often. Since my baby was born, I haven't been doing that very much. But it's another place that you can reach me. If you have parents that are still struggling or needing some extra help, please feel free to reach out to me. I would love to help them however I can. So that's it. Are there other questions?
So we will give about 5 minutes for questions. If you have any, you can either put them in chat or just go ahead and unmute. You have a comment in there. It says, love the chart with the wake window and bedtimes by age.
Yes, so helpful. I refer to that all the time.
And the slides will be available in the follow-up email. They're also on our Canvas page.
I would also, if you can find that research on the bedtimes, I would love to be able to share that with my family that I see who sleeps from 2 a.m. to 2 p.m.
Whew. That is hard. Yeah, let me find that and I will email that to you, Janelle, and then you can send that out.
Perfect. Question about any additional suggestions for children with autism or ADHD?
Yeah. So usually with them, routine is one of those things that is really super important. I've created bedtime charts, or if they use like a different form of communication with pictures or whatever it is, to help them kind of, we do our pajamas first and then brush our teeth, and then just really, really sticking to that routine I have found helpful. I've also noticed for kids who have, you mentioned autism and ADHD, right? That they are more affected by like sunlight and blue light. And so making sure they're getting that physical activity and exposure to the sun is really important. And then routine.
Hey, well, great. Thank you so much, Rachel, for sharing all of that information with us. It was a pleasure having you present with us. And like I said, if you can stay on and listen to our case, that's always great. I'm going to turn the time over to Jennifer, and Jennifer is a family who's looking for a ton of our ideas, guys. So,
Janelle, there was another question.
Oh, I didn't
before.
see that. Sorry, Rachel. Hope you're still on.
Yes.
So it says, what do you recommend for a 30-month-old that wakes up at 3 a.m., continues to rejoin for co-sleeping, routine is solid, nutrition is great, and will recommend more stimulation in the day? Yeah.
Great question. So usually I would look at why they're waking up at 3 a.m. It sounds like it's probably become a habit. And if they're able to get back into bed with their parents, they're probably looking for that. So I would encourage them to, instead of letting them rejoin in bed, having kind of a routine for when they wake up and putting them back to sleep in their own bed. That's where I'd start.
Great. All right. Any other questions? Okay. Well, I will thank you again. And then Jennifer, if you want to go ahead and share your screen and.
Okay, let me just get it ready here. Okay. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Jennifer Yen, and I am an early intervention parent. And I'm also an educator. I will actually be starting my first year teaching this coming year, so I'm very excited for that. Okay, so I will be sharing a case study on my son. So a little bit of background on our case. So starting with who am I? I'm an early intervention parent. I will be a first year teacher. So yeah, the setting for this case is at home, specifically during our nighttime routine and sleep through the night. So my child's health background, he is a 3-year-old autistic toddler with high self-injurious behaviors. He's also nonverbal and has other disabilities such as HIE, which it's short for a longer term. It basically means a lack of oxygen to the brain during birth. He also has cerebral palsy and seizures. With the cerebral palsy, he is able to walk now and he's very mobile. And yeah, so his more apparent disabilities, I would say, is the autism and the seizures. Along with the HIE, he's had developmental delays, which are very apparent. So yeah, that's a little bit of the background on my son. Sleep has been one of the biggest issues that we've had since birth, but I'll go more into that in the next few slides. So family culture, my son comes from a Hispanic family. He is an only child who lives with his parents and maternal grandparents. An authoritative parenting style is used by both parents. We're sure to set clear expectations. We try to have open communication with him. Since he's nonverbal, it's hard for him to communicate with us, but we try our best to communicate with him. And we use natural consequences when needed. So our primary area of concern, so with my son, it's his irregular sleep patterns. He constantly wakes throughout the night. He screams and pulls at his hair and has a hard time falling back asleep. Because of this, he's unable to sleep in his own bed and his own room. So some of the goals and barriers. So we've previously met with a doctor in the sleep clinic, and we set a goal that my son will sleep in his own bed. However, this goal has not been met because it is not safe for him to sleep on his own. We met with them in January, and since then we've tried to get him to sleep on his own, but it's been really hard. So let's see. Okay, so some of the goals are to be able to sleep on his own bed and be able to sleep throughout the night. Some of the barriers are when he wakes up, he engages in self-injurious behaviors. So it's really hard to have him sleep in his own place. We really have to be there to block those behaviors and prevent him from hurting himself. He also sits up and throws himself back while sleeping. So he'll like sit down and just swing his whole body back. And then he will not sleep if he doesn't feel his parents near him. With this, I did want to mention the first about 6 months of life, he was sleeping on his own in a bassinet. But as soon as he started to turn and sit up, that's when it got kind of dangerous for him because he would swing back, and then that's when his self-injurious behaviors got pretty severe. Some additional information. So here I have things that have not worked and things that have worked for us. Starting with things that have not worked. So we have tried to put him in his crib to sleep. This did not work for him because he would bang his head on the frame of the crib. We also did try to put pool noodles along the frame, but that didn't work either. He would rip them off, and yeah, it just wasn't effective for us. Something else that hasn't worked is we tried to put a mattress on the floor. This also did not work because he would get off and bang his head on the floor when he didn't see us near him. Some of the things that have worked for us is having a nighttime routine. That's been really helpful because he has just learned what's expected of him during this time, and he just knows the order of our nighttime routine, so it's easier for us to get him to sleep, which is something that we struggled with also before. And then using medications such as trazodone, that has helped him sleep for longer periods at a time. He used to sleep for only about an hour to 2 hours at a time. And now, since he started the trazodone, he sleeps for 3 to 4 hours at a time throughout the night. Okay, so community discussion. On this slide, I have 3 questions that I would like suggestions on. So yeah, starting with the first one. Are there any ideas or suggestions for beds where he can sleep alone and be safe? I know that there are some safe beds out there, but I've looked into the prices and they're very expensive. So if you guys know of any alternatives, that would be great. My second question is, what can we do to help him, to help get him back to sleep after he wakes up throughout the night? And then the last one is, he currently takes trazodone for sleep. Are there alternative medications that are recommended to help with sleep? Since he does get seizures, he's on 2 medications for seizures, which have helped reduce the seizure activity in his brain, and it helps get him to sleep. But aside from trazodone, is there anything else that we can use for sleep? And I believe that's the end. Do you guys have any questions for me?
So you have a question that says, when he wakes up in the middle of the night, what will usually help him fall back asleep?
Yeah, so what we have to do is basically put some arm braces on his arms to help to prevent him from pulling his hair. And that has been helping recently. It prevents him from pulling his hair and hurting himself. And so instead of fighting it, he'll just fall back asleep. But sometimes it can take up to an hour and a half. There's times where we're just so tired that we give in and turn on the screen, but that's very rare. That's only like in severe cases where he's just not sleeping.
And then
I have a question.
okay.
Sorry.
No,
I'm
you're
wondering,
good.
you said if he doesn't feel parents next to him, then he gets upset. Have you tried having like a stuffed animal or a weighted animal or blanket or something in lieu of you? And I didn't see that mentioned.
Yeah. So we have tried a weighted blanket and a weighted stuffed animal, and that doesn't seem to work. And he does have other stuffed animals that are his favorites, but even those don't work.
Okay.
And then another one that says, does he have seizures at night?
So he's gotten a couple of EEGs and they show seizures, like he has seizure activity all the time. He's only had 2 big seizures last month and the month before. So, I mean, that's kind of a hard question because he does have seizure activity all the time, but they're just very small seizures, I would say, not very apparent.
I have a question. Have you tried getting insurance coverage for a safety bed? Because they are expensive, but sometimes you can get, Medicaid is a little bit easier than private insurance, but sometimes you can get some insurance coverage for that.
I actually have not, I didn't know they covered the beds. Like we've gotten other things covered, like adaptive stroller and all that, but I will definitely look into a bed.
I have a question.
Mhm.
And I put it in chat. You mentioned that you tried the floor mattress, but did you try it next to your bed? So that
Yes.
he could, okay,
Mhm. Yeah, it was at the foot of our bed, so it was close to us where we could hear him and be there.
what about like right next to the side of your bed instead of at the foot, where all he has to do is reach up and touch you? Or you reach down and touch him?
No, that I didn't try that. I just tried it at
Okay.
the,
And another question is does he have any sleep apnea?
I'm not sure. Would that be like a diagnosis that he has?
Like, have they done a sleep study to see if because if he's waking up flailing and hitting his head, that goes into the next question, which asks if he does self-interest during the day. But I'm wondering if he's having a fear response, and that's why he wants you guys there. If he's waking up gasping or feeling like he can't breathe, and that's where that panic and flailing comes from. So I didn't know if he'd have a sleep study to monitor his breathing and heart rate and all that during the night.
Yeah, that's actually something I forgot to mention. He did have one sleep study last year, and during that sleep study, he did not wake up at all. He was super calm and slept through the night. So it was,
Of course.
yeah. So they weren't able to find anything, and that's when they referred us to the sleep clinic. But yeah, there was, yeah.
Okay, and then Janelle, it looks like you have your hand raised.
Yes, I was just wondering if the weighted blanket and or the weighted stuffed animal, if you had ever tried having some of your scent, like sleeping with that one night before using it, and or using a t-shirt that you had worn all day and putting that on the stuffed animal.
That's
The
exactly what I wondered.
smell is
too.
huge.
Your shirt.
Yeah, I had never thought of that. So thank you for that. I'm going to write that down.
Well, it does sound like you're going to get some great resources. I'm going to go with one more question and then we're going to go into our breakout groups. So Amy, it looks like your hand is up.
Does he enjoy physical? Let me back up. I had a kiddo that had very similar concerns, and he now runs for 45 minutes before bedtime and now goes to sleep. He doesn't flip anymore. So how physical does he like that kind of physical activity? What does he enjoy?
Yeah, so since he is autistic, he does attend ABA therapy, and his recommended hours, I believe, are 30 hours a week. And so that takes up a big chunk of his day. He most of the time will be there from 8 to 2 p.m. and that just depends on like how high his self-injurious behaviors, because he does get sent home sometimes. But he's very active there, and then typically when he comes home is when he takes a nap. And then when he wakes up, we try to keep him active. We take him outside. We have a trampoline that he goes on. He doesn't yet have the skills to jump, but as long as we're there, like running around and engaging with him, then he's fine. And yeah, so he's pretty active most of his day.
Okay, great. Well, it does sound like you're going to get some great resources. We are going to put you guys into 5 different breakout groups. So if you'll take a minute, turn on your camera, do some basic introductions, Kirsten, I see your question and she's going to go into your breakout group first, so you'll be able to follow up with that question. So Shelby so we're going to have Shelby as group. She is going to answer, are there any ideas or suggestions for beds when he can sleep alone and be safe? Our two breakout groups, Shelby and Crystal, your breakout group will do that question as well. And then we have two breakout groups for question number 3, which is going to be 1 Heather and 2 Kirsten. And that is, how do we help him get back to sleep after he wakes up through the night? And then Pat's group is going to tackle that question number 3. He is on that sleep medication, and are there alternative for sleep medications?
Can I request to be in that group?
Bailey, will you make Erica part of that group? And so, as I said before, take a minute and do introductions. It's a great way to build that professional networking. And then we'll reconvene, and after a minute, you should see that pop up.
Sorry, what was the group, Erica? What was the name?
Number 3.
Number 3, okay.
So Pat's group.
Okay.
Hey, you should see those pop up on your screen. Hi, welcome back, everybody. I've dropped the survey in to the chat. If everybody will take a minute and do the survey. We're just going to go around to all of our groups. If you will present one idea that we can share as a group, I'm going to start with Shelby's group. So I don't know who you chose or did the note taking.
Yeah, so we were talking about some of those tent beds, and obviously there's the really expensive ones that you can get insurance coverage for, worth checking out, but also there's some cheaper options around $200 or less, with either a pop-up tent or like a tent bed on Amazon. Also other ideas, but we'll send those in an email or something.
Great, fantastic. Crystal, how about your group? What was one idea?
Yeah, maybe one other idea would be compression sheets that where it kind of is like a sleeping bag for the mattress. I don't know. Anyway, it stretches, but it kind of gives some compression without the heat and without the weight of weighted blanket.
Awesome, great ideas. Kirsten, your group. You're on mute.
I just realized that. We had lots of discussion because we had both Jennifer and Rachel in our group. So we had a lot of questions and stuff too. One of the big things was just kind of checking medical concerns, and make sure that we were addressing all the medical concerns that might be waking him up. And then I'm just going to say one more thing too. Rachel talked about perhaps having him drop his nap at 3, and maybe that'll help him sleep a little bit better as well. So either dropping or limiting the nap. So.
Oh, great ideas. All right, Heather, how about one idea from your group?
So one of the things that we talked about is maybe dropping the temperature in the room a degree or 2. Having multiple bodies in a room can warm it up pretty quickly. And then also being thoughtful about if we're charging our phones or our tablets, that blue light might be disrupting him.
Oh, great idea. And then Pat, one idea from your group.
Okay, so we had one medical professional, Dr. Allen, in our group, and the rest of us said we know nothing about meds except our own experience, so melatonin. And then Erica did mention clonidine being used as the next med. And then it was mentioned that all of these things should be done when the child's older. You don't want to do it when their brains are still pretty, yeah. So anyway, yeah, it was good, very good discussion.
I would
Fantastic.
say on that too, though.
What's
the
that?
clonidine would be a switch out for the trazodone. You wouldn't want to do in combination.
Right.
Okay, well, fantastic. If you guys will email any of those recommendations over to Kate Bennington, she just dropped her email into the chat. We will compile that list for you, Jennifer, and share it out with you as well as for everybody else. It will be on our Canvas page, so you could go and look at all of those results or recommendations. I just want to remind you again to complete our survey, and then also to let you know that our next sessions for the rest of the year will be on autism. So in our September session, we will be talking about autism and what it looks like in the toddler years. Then we will also have URAD, so Utah Registry of Autism and Developmental Delays, joining us. We'll be having our amazing hub member Kirsten talking about physical mobility in autism, as well as speech and language communication in autism. So hopefully you can join us for our sessions all around autism for the next 4 months. Thank you so much for your time. Enjoy the next afternoon.
Thank you.
Hopefully it's not raining where you are. We're rainy.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.